there you go. Great. Hey, gang.
Hello.
Good morning. Nice to see so many familiar faces here and folks I've only seen on Zoom. The thing about Zoom is you recognize people, but you don't know if they're short or they're tall. That's anyway, you're all about medium size. Anyway, nice to see you all. I'm Luyen Chou. Thanks for the intro, Tony. I mean, Tony and I have just had this incredible relationship, and all the folks really from ASGA, and just super grateful for everything I've learned through you, Tony, and through everybody here. Just a little bit about GotOne and myself first. So my background is professionally is in a completely different arena than what all of you are working on. I'm in awe of all the science in this room. I am a longtime entrepreneur in artificial intelligence, product technology. I've been the chief product and chief technology officer of large public companies, mostly in the education space. So my big field is really in online learning. And I've been involved in that for the better part of 35 years. I've built and sold 3 different companies in the online learning space. But I've always been an incredibly passionate angler, and specifically a saltwater fly angler. And a total data nerd because of my work. And like many of you, particularly those of you who are more of my age, I've spent decades trying to keep accurate records of my catches. And as all of you who've ever tried to do that know, saltwater and paper fishing logs don't go well together. And so, for all of my attempts to keep all of this data about my catches, it's never really ended very well. And as a technology guy, I've always said to myself, like, this is ridiculous. Especially when the cell phone came around. The cell phone knows, what time it is and exactly where I am. And from that data can gather every piece of information that I would ever want to know about a catch. Water conditions, environmental conditions, moon phases, tides, etc. Why has no one created an app to allow me to just tap a button and capture everything about the fish that I caught? And I didn't build the app for years because I figured someone would do it. And then you have apps out there that, like FishBrain, which are really more spot burning tools. Frankly, is the way I think about it. They're tracking tools, they're social media tools. I use Instagram or Facebook to tell people about the catches that I catch, the fish I catch. It's not really a tool that helps me get better as an angler through data. And that was the selfish reason that I built GotOne in the first place. And it was only after I started to, and I was sort of separately involved in fisheries management issues and conservation, just again selfishly because I am seeing the stocks of the fish that I love decline, and thinking, how can I help understand better what's going on? How can I contribute to it? It's only when I really met Tony and Peter Jenkins and folks starting ASGA that I began to realize there was an opportunity to take this very selfish interest in creating a tool and use it to help advance the science of fisheries. And as I started to dig into it, started to realize, with all due respect to all the marine scientists here, how poor the data is about recreational fishing. And so things that I took for granted in terms of what I would want to know about my catches were completely unavailable to stock scientists that I talked to. And so that became a kind of a mission for me to try to bridge the gap between my personal interest in data and fishing and helping fisheries science get better at understanding what's actually going on in aggregate. So I want to say a huge shout out to Tom Fuda, who's here. Wave your hand. Tom, like me, is an obsessed saltwater fly angler. He heard about what I was doing through a Zoom session. We do a thing called Masters of the Fly also on Zoom during the off season. And we had ASGA on, and I was talking about GotOne, and Tom just emailed me. He's like, listen, I'm a longtime software engineer. I come out of the security industry and cybersecurity and sort of enterprise software, but I'm an obsessed fly fisherman. Can I help you with this? And Tom has worked for free for literally the last year and a half doing unbelievable work on this app. I mean, we would never have been able to build what we've built without the work from Tom. So huge thank you to Tom. Dirk Liebich has never caught a fish in his life. Actually, I think he's caught one fish. He likes to eat fish, but he doesn't know anything about catching fish. He's a Berlin-based AI expert. I've worked with him in EdTech projects. He is like the best of the best in the AI world and has just been incredibly excited about what we're trying to do with GotOne and has also worked for free. I'll show you some of the work he's doing. It's just absolutely groundbreaking, and we're super excited about taking state-of-the-art AI technology and bringing it to this field of fisheries science. So for those of you who aren't using GotOne, what is it? So very, very simply, it's a data-driven fishing log app for your iPhone, for your Android phone, focused on US inshore, nearshore, saltwater fishing. That's really what it is. It will apply, we have lots of interest in this for freshwater fisheries, for international fisheries. We're focused right now on US coastal fisheries, but we will expand over time. The idea was to make it super simple to log a catch. It's not about tracking your trip. It's about literally like you catch a fish, you tap a button, or you upload a photo, or you take a photo in the app, and everything you need to know about that catch is recorded instantly. And I'll talk a little more about this, but one of the huge and you can use your voice too, right? So if you're on a boat and the screen has got salt water on it, whatever, you just say, hey, got one, striped bass, 34 inches, boom, captured. One of the huge unlocks for us was use of photo data, because what many people know here, but some don't, is your photo, unless you turn off your location services, your photo has metadata in it. It has a timestamp, the date stamp, and the exact long lat of where the photo was taken. So if you upload a photo, we can capture all of the environmental data about that catch through that metadata. So we have guides here, many in this room, who literally have gone back and they've now created logs of their catches from the last many years by just uploading photos from their photo albums. It automatically creates this log. So super simple to create the data that you need to understand what's actually going on. And part of what the motivation for this was, I think I was in one too many bar arguments with a bunch of guides about whether the best striped bass fishing is on the first 6 days before the full moon, or the 6 days after the full moon, or the 6 days before the new moon, or the 6 days after the new moon. I'm like, this is data. We should be able to figure this out. And if anyone's interested, I actually know the answer to that question, and I can show it to you in the data. But then the idea was, all right, if we can not only help anglers, but then aggregate that data, anonymize, and this is a critical piece, because I know how private all of us are as fishermen, how concerned we are about protecting our spots. So anonymizing that data and then generalizing the location information to a multi-mile increment. We basically lop off all the decimal numbers from the long lat. So your spot is a 11 to 50 mile increment, basically, circle. For fishery scientists, when I first sort of thought of this, and I was like, well, this isn't going to be useful to scientists. They need to know an exact spot. And when I talked to scientists, they said, are you kidding me? If I don't need to even know exactly where it is at all, so we're working with NOAA, I'll talk about this in a minute. We're about to start working with them on bluefish discard length data, right? So you catch a bluefish, you measure the length. We've got probably over 800 of those just in the first season of GotOne. When we talked to our friend Tony Woods, who's unfortunately not here today, who's with NOAA, who's a stock assessment manager or a scientist for bluefish, he's like, if we get 20 lengths for a season, that's like hitting a home run. He said, I don't need to know where that is if you just tell me the length. So in many cases, the precision with which an angler needs the information is actually quite a bit more than what scientists need for various applications. So our friends from MassDMF, I know Ben Gehagen's here, the study that they're doing on the impact of fight time, landing time, and release time on the vitality of striped bass, that's not a location-dependent study. So there are applications for the data that we have that don't require that precision that are incredibly valuable. And part of what we're finding is, you have to match the data available and what we're willing to share with the specific scientific application. That's really the key takeaway that we've learned. And so this idea of taking angler data privacy seriously. So we have made a commitment in our website, in all of our documentation, that we will never share specific data about where you caught that fish. It will always be generalized to multi-mile increments, and that is what's driven the adoption that we've gotten from the fishing community. So our vision is, very simply, if you boil it down, the most important thing is to help anglers become better at their craft through data-driven insights, which is really what I wanted to do. And at the same time, to advance fisheries management and research by helping every angler become a citizen scientist and to contribute to our understanding of fish stocks. So you can, if you haven't downloaded the app, you can download the app, scan the QR code, or just go to GotOneApp.com or the App Store. We've had huge support from American Saltwater Guides Association and funding through them. All our initial funding came through them, through the Nature Conservancy, through Hatch Reels, and through Hoagie Lures. Thanks, Mike Hogan, who's here too. It's really been an interesting collaboration between both nonprofit, government agencies, a startup like us, and commercial fishing organizations. So I think it's a model for how we can work together as a community to advance science. And thanks to all of you, we've had incredible user adoption. So we're nowhere near what a FishBrain is with many millions of users, although I would argue most of those users aren't actually users. They've downloaded the app. I have the app on my phone and I never use it. I think our users are really avid users. So we've got over 2,000 users in our first year of being out there. The adoption curve has just been incredible. If you zoom in just to since April, you can see just the steep curve in adoption, and that is really driven by our partnerships. So you can see here, this big vertical hockey stick coincided with two social posts, one by Hoagie and Salty Cape, really saying, hey, when you catch fish this spring, use the GotOne app so that we understand what's happening with striped bass better. And then the announcement from ASGA about our work on bluefish discard length. So, it's incredible how this partnership really kind of spirals in a positive direction. It's just amazing to see that kind of activity. And we've had over 9,000, close to 10,000 catches logged at this point across 26 species and counting. The most frequent email that Tom and I get is, hey, can you add fill in the blank of 7 more species? And this is truly like a family operation. So the logo was designed by my daughter, and all of the illustrations of the fish are designed by her roommate. So that's the limiting factor for how fast we can add fish. So I'll actually go into this in a little more detail in a second. We really have started, instead of just trying to get anyone to sign up, we have started with the professionals, the leaders in the industry, and many of you here. So these are just 3 examples, but guides, innovators, social media, fishermen, leading companies like Hoagie. It's really about leading from the front. This is about proving to anglers that those of you in this room who are the experts are really using this for yourselves and also using it to advance science. And that's been a very unique approach to GotOne. And as a result of that, we've really also been able to forge these incredible partnerships, scientific partnerships. So we now have partnerships with NOAA, with MassDMF, with the Global Fish AI Consortium. I'll talk a little bit about that later. ASMFC around redfish, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fish around redfish as well. Huge shout out to the folks here at MBL and Scott, and we're doing some really interesting work there, which I'll preview for you in a little bit. Here at Woods Hole, Greg Scomo as well, starting to work on great white sharks. So, okay, what does it do? So very, very simply, when you log a fish, right, it knows the date, time, location. The app will seamlessly fetch relevant environmental data around water temperature, tide and current, wind direction, speed, moon phase and fraction, and increasingly we're also looking at things, we're going to start to look at things like barometric pressure, salinity, anything that fish anglers and scientists are interested in around a catch, we can start to record. The availability of this data through data APIs out there is just incredible. And then on the back end, so all of this gets aggregated into a NoSQL database, in Firebase, let me go back. And then it's available, so we set up exports, timed exports in JSON or CSV files to our research partners. If people want live access, they can have live access. But again, we'll anonymize the data and we'll concatenate the long and lat. Just very quickly, so this is just to show you real fast what it looks like. That's the app. It's very simple, big button. So if you just want to log a catch, you just tap that glowing button, or you can tap the image icon. If you tap an image icon, you can upload a photo of a fish. If you upload the photo, all you have to do is tap species and length. And then because it knows the location, it's now grabbing all of that environmental data automatically. And now if we have a research partnership, it'll ask you whether you want to participate in the survey. There it is. So it knows where I caught it. It knows the exact conditions. And even if you upload this 3 years later, all that data, it's been really fun for me because I've been uploading old photos, and I'm like, oh, I remember I caught that at point X, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't catch that there at all. Oh, that was on a full moon tide. No, it wasn't. It was actually on a neat moon tide, right? If you adjust the date and time, so here I am, I'm going to drag the location. I'm like, that wasn't right. It didn't record the right point. It didn't record the right date and time. It will then go and update all the environmental data accordingly. So it's smart enough to know, oh, okay, there's where you caught it, and it's adjusted all of the condition data. All right. So then if you want to, so I mentioned the MassDMF study. So if I look at the record of that fish, you'll see striper study up there on the right. That gives the user a specific survey that we worked on with the MassDMF folks, where you can add landing time, release time, hook location, and then that data goes automatically to the MassDMF folks. So useful to you as an angler, but super useful to all of us in aggregate for scientific purposes. So aggregate insights, so in just over a year of use, just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that we can start to tell anglers about what we know, right? So we actually, if you scan this QR code, you'll see our, this was a 2023 Almanac. I actually created a flip book for everyone that actually gave insights across all of our users. So here are the number of fish caught by species, catches by species and month. There's Tom with his headlamp with a nice bass. But things like this. So talked about moon, right? So here you go. Here's the data around number of catches by moon fraction. Right? We now know from the data. This is interesting, right? So here's striped bass size distribution by frequency. So again, this data will keep getting richer and richer and richer. We can look at it by season, by region, over all time. This was really interesting to me. So striped bass caught by water temperature distribution, right? So I guess on the lower left, not surprising, right? Just over 60 degrees. But what's really interesting is if you disaggregate by location, it's totally different. So Raritan Bay, the optimal temperature is totally different than Montauk, which kind of makes sense. Raritan's an early and late season spot. Montauk's more of a midsummer spot or early summer spot. So imagine this data is just going to aggregate over time. It'll get richer and richer as we go. This is, I mentioned all the catch data. I'm going to show you this live, which no one gets to see other than you folks. This is a real-time map. Now, I am purposely randomizing the locations of these specific fish within a multi-mile increment, so that it's not, again, not blowing a spot. But you can see the color indicates species, a dot indicates catch, And what's really cool is we started out up here in the Northeast, but we announced our partnership with LDWF and a bunch of the Louisiana guides, Bailey Shorts here, and you can see we're already since just like February capturing all sorts of redfish data, right? So if I click on here, that's a specific catch. That's a specific redfish catch. This is data that LDWF has never had about redfish, partly because they have no commercial fisheries, so they have no data about commercial catches, and there's really no way, systematic way for fishermen to capture data about redfish catches there as well. If I go up here to the Northeast, you can see obviously the orange is striped bass, which is the most prevalent fish. This is my neck of the woods here. So that's a bass that was caught, in November of 2023. And we actually have an animated version of this. So for those of you who've seen like the on the water striper migration map, which is kind of a hand-drawn thing, we do a version of that with the actual data. And you can see season by season how those fish are actually migrating. Okay, let me just go back to this. So science partnerships that we're excited about. So one of the things that we just recently added, and this was really in response to, I went down with Tony and the ASGA folks down to Louisiana to really, witness firsthand what's going on with redfish fishery down there. And what LDWF has asked for is the ability to get additional data, just very similar to what MassDMF has done about redfish that were caught in Louisiana. And at the same time, ASMFC, which manages redfish on the Atlantic coast, wanted similar data about redfish on the Atlantic coast. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we're getting the survey information to the right agency based on where it was caught? So what we were able to do here is we've created these GIS files, so you can build a shapefile of a specific region that becomes data within our database, and now it knows when you catch a fish and your long lat is within this shapefile, it pops up the Louisiana survey. If you catch it within the coastal waters of the Atlantic coastline, it pops up the ASMFC survey. And what's really interesting too is these agencies, they're doing the exact same study. They've never talked to each other about this. So we became the occasion for them to line up the data that they're using around this. So that's been a collateral impact of this is we're acting now as a fulcrum for different agencies to start to share data about species. And you can see we're already getting, this very, very small amount of data, but already you can start to see things about the things I was showing about striped bass, but now related to redfish. We've never had this data before. And again, this is a lot of times when we talk about this initially, stock scientists say, well, this is not, you don't have the accuracy, this doesn't have the validity that an MRIP has, or data that we get that is ACCSP compliant, and so, but it's the purpose you're using here, right? So this is what I would call formative data. It's directional data, and it should tell us as scientists, or tell the scientific community where we should start to investigate, what questions we should ask. Maybe you don't use it for a management or compliance, sort of regulation. You really use it to direct your understanding of what's going on in our marine fisheries. And that's, by the way, how things work in other industries, right? So if you're driving your car across mountain range, you sure as hell want the USGS to be doing the topo maps of that mountain range. But it's Google and it's Apple and it's Waze that are actually creating the data to figure out the fastest route from point A to point B through that mountain range, right? So they're very different uses of consumer data from scientific data, but they can converge in really interesting, useful ways. So I want to talk a little bit about AI because that's really where I come from and where I'm super excited about the future roadmap for not just our app, but really for where these sort of data apps can intersect with our interests in the fisheries community. So, and a lot of this started with, just brainstorming with Tony about things that we could do, and then, it's so cool how things happen, So Scott actually listened to the podcast I did with Tony and emailed us and was like, hey, let me tell you what we're doing at MBL, and that's how Greg got to us too. And so it really is this kind of feedback loop that we've created. So this is an example here on the right side. This is actually a beta version that's available that we can show you if anyone's interested. But We can now identify species completely through AI. So we've eliminated the tap that you need to do, the scroll and tap to identify the species, right? So you can see here it is, the AI has identified that picture I showed you earlier is a striped bass. It is extremely accurate. There's some fish that we're still having some issues with, but generally speaking, for the fish that you're interested in, incredibly accurate. And one of the things that, Chris, we were talking about with North Carolina is, you have 3 major flounder species in North Carolina, which have very different stock situations right now. And if you catch a summer flounder versus a southern flounder, I think I got that right, very different regulatory implications and stock implications. We can actually help open up a fishery if we're able to help anglers distinguish between those 2 species. AI can do it far more effectively than a human being can. And this is already working. This is in the app. We just have to release it and make it ready for prime time. And you can see what we're doing. So the way the AI works is we want to really narrow down what features are going to allow us to identify species. So the first step is actually segmenting fish from everything else, which gives us an additional benefit, which is the privacy concern. So when the image is uploaded, we actually eliminate now the human being in it. So it's non-identifiable from the face. And then the AI can focus on a much smaller piece of data and then creates an analysis. This is the API, which then leads to the identification of the species. But what's even more interesting, and these are images from Scott from the eel pond here, is we are closing in, and this is unique. So other groups have worked on fish species identification. Oops, sorry. But where we're really focused now is on individual fish identification. So we are pretty certain that we can identify individual striped bass, for instance, by their stripe pattern with the same rigor and uniqueness that you can identify a human fingerprint. And so what's going on in this image? So on the bottom is a set of, this is how the computer that we've trained is visioning the stripes on a fish now. So it's using what's called convolutional neural networks to basically isolate the features that are most distinctive for a particular fish. And then up here, this is the same fish image, but what we did was we skewed it because what we wanted to see was whether the AI could actually match the key features, the key scales from one image to the other with a different orientation, and it's able to perfectly do that. So, and we've now started to experiment with looking at that over time series. So we are pretty sure we can do that over a 3 to 4 year time period. There's a group from USGS working with folks in Japan who've been able to do it over a 5-year time sequence with trout using the par marks. So we're 90% sure that this will work across the entire lifespan of a striped bass. We will probably have to train different models for different species. So if you think about a great white shark, and one of the reasons we're so interested in things like sharks is they don't obviously have the same features in terms of like the spot patterns on a redfish or on a flounder, or the stripe pattern on a striped bass. There you're looking more at a specific physiological elements and differences in morphology and so on. But we think that's as easily trainable, and it's a smaller population, so we can do that. And so think about the applications of something like this. For any of you who've seen a fish that's got a big spaghetti tag in it and has all this detritus coming off of it, or any of you who've been involved in tagging, as many of you have in this room, it is you're in many cases, and particularly if it's not a spaghetti tag, you're dealing with anesthetizing the fish, or you're just keeping this thing alive. It's quite traumatic, and given what we know already from the mass DMS studies of striped bass catch and release vitality, it's not really a great thing to practice. I mean, obviously, professionals do it well. This allows every angler, every recreational angler, to basically become a tagger. It would radically increase the number of tagged fish, and it would allow us to keep those tags for the entire lifespan of the fish, because it's not a physical device. It might get cut off accidentally or come off through, over time. And that's really our vision and our goal, is that we will allow every angler out there to effectively tag every fish that they catch for perpetuity. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or comments from everyone.